told us this is actually a paradigm shift, that having different opinion does not necessarily mean that we have to be enemies. And that's important. And Datuk Seri, you're not only going to be the minister that perhaps brings the most constitutional amendments in a term, but I think you also show how an East Malaysian leader can bring a different types of politics to the picture. This is actually a paradigm shift, that having different opinion does not necessarily means that we have to be enemies. And that's important. And Datuk Seri, you're not only going to be the minister that perhaps brings the most constitutional amendments in a term, but I think you also show how an East Malaysian leader can bring a different types of politics to the picture. Congratulations, Datuk Seri. And there are questions popping up that will all these things be changed after the next election? The related question to that is, if election is not to be called immediately after the end of the MoU by 31st of July, then the government would have a longer time when we actually have more reforms that we can actually put in. Because from what you have shown us, this is actually a good time for us to prepare for the future, because we may have again another hung parliament, or we may have a restoration of a strong government. But in either way, we probably need more changes. Now, I would like to open to the floor. Anyone want to have any questions, please?
I feel a little humbled to be called a parliamentary expert in front of Datuk Seri Junaidi. I'm certainly not compared to his experience. Datuk Seri, if I may, first of all, congratulate you on the progress that you've managed to make thus far with institutional reforms under the MoU. My question actually falls into two parts, if I may. So first off, while the MoU is indeed groundbreaking and it has achieved its aim of creating political stability, it is still essentially a short-term and bilateral agreement. What's missing perhaps is, or rather what's less obvious, are the long-term benefits to parliamentary democracy, and I'm talking specifically about the processes and procedures in Parliament. So my question, Datuk Seri, is what specific improvements, apart from the Parliamentary Services Act, can we expect to see to parliamentary procedures, amendments and improvements that I hope will strengthen the independence and equality between MPs? You mentioned some of that already. You spoke, and you were of course right, about the special privileges that ministers have in Parliament that other MPs, private members, whether they are on the government backbench or the opposition, don't have on simple things like moving motions, tabling bills. So I would like to ask if these issues are on the table, if the standing orders will be improved to give more access, more equitable access to all MPs. That's my first question. And secondly, related to that as well, is, and this is in the MoU, is in relation to the constituency development plans. It is wonderful, the agreement that has been reached in the MoU, but can we expect to see a piece of legislation that ensures this is implemented in the long term, that the right to CDF is no longer within the control of the Prime Minister of the day, but it is a right of all MPs?
Well, we definitely agree with you 100% that this MoU is really an opportunity for us to push through some of the very important reforms. It's all ready if we need any assistance on this. The second question is on anti-hopping.
Standing orders and rules to accommodate the other MPs, other than the government MP, to bring up motion or whatever, include the private member bill, which is not found in our system at the moment. Even though it is stated in the what we call the standing orders and rules about the presentation of private member bill, but the process and procedure is not being provided in the standing orders and rules. And that is why every time people mention to me about private member bill, I say it is not provided for. Because if you look at in England, the moment a bill is elected from private member, accepted to be tabled, then he or she will get the financial support to draft the bill. That means he can get a consultant or even get somebody from AG's office to draft the bill for him or her to bring to Parliament. And second thing, provided some other funding for other process. And then there's some other facilities. And then there's certain days in a week or in a month allocated to decide on the private member bill. Even though normally not all the private member bill ever reach the House of Commons for debate, but still there are some important ones reach the chamber for debate and eventually even pass. So history shows it from time to time, private member will come, even though by the thousand, but at least by the dozen, always go through in Parliament. That's on the private member bill. Yes, of course. I mentioned this issue to Speaker. After this, I explained. The same thing with the other motion brought by ordinary member of Parliament, because there's a provision, they call it Rule 15. Rule 15 is very interesting. It gives priority to all the government's business. So it means every day you can see the government business. It's just not enough for government business every day. Every session is not enough for government business. The last session we still have about 10 bills not being debated. For so long as those government bills are not being debated, your motion will stay in the order of the day. Every day you can see it, but we'll never debate on it. So again, in a place like England, other Commonwealth countries, they have special provision. For certain date, those issues be debated. Of course, previously, if there's any issue raised under, they call it Rules 18, the thing that immediate or public interest need to be debated by day one. And every day you can see 5 or 6 those kind of bill, this kind of issue being raised up by Member of Parliament. Whether it satisfies all the 3 criteria or not, always being rejected for reason that the Parliament simply don't have the time. They only can debate only one issue a day. So now we have already formed special chamber under Rule 17 in order to allow those kind of issues be debated. But again, it's only just a person table it and then the minister will just stand and answer the question. And now I think the Speaker is looking into the revision of the one to allow debate in that special chamber. So that's another improvement. Another thing is, let's put it very straight. I, as a minister, representative of the executive, my role is only to see the government agenda in Parliament. I cannot interfere directly with what Parliament decide on, because that will be tantamount to interference with the legislative process. So therefore, I only can raise up issue and recommend to the Speaker for things to be amended. Okay, that's the first one just now. The second one, Select Committee. Again, the Select Committee, I disagree. Right from 2018, all the Select Committee formed in 2018 were, they call it Special Select Committee. I said it is not. It is under Rule 81(1). Because 81(1) is a special select committee appointed by the government to look certain issues. For instance, when the family law was to be amended, remember? 1975, something like that, family law was amended in order to stop, especially a few of my friends said,
MoU cynically as a compromise out of convenience. But from what
we have to tell the speaker, the two speakers, perhaps when they amend the law for the parliamentary service, most probably they have to include that. Thank you.
Datuk Seri, rather than he or she takes the initiative to resign and seek re-election, because one would seem like a punishment and would be demonized as fraud. But if the person take a principal stand and run, that's a different story. Would we do away Article 48(6) together while introducing anti-hopping law? Yeah.
At the moment, we have not put our mind to it actually. For those who resign from as a member of parliament, let's say, just to illustrate the point, let's say I tomorrow decided and tell a speaker, right, letter speaker, okay, I'm resigning as a member of parliament. So based on Article 48(6), I will not be able to contest for the next 5 years, apart from contesting. So it was not being considered in that sense. We consider only in the relation to anti-hopping. When it comes to anti-hopping, for reason that he's expelled by his party, he left his party because he quarreled with his president or something like that. Or now we have also decided the independent who joined the party, that become anti-hopping as well, under the term anti-hopping. So he has got to resign. But we got to bring back these people. The spirit of the right to recall. The spirit of right to recall was being discussed at length in the Convention of Commonwealth Parliamentary Association in Delhi, 2003. I was there. So the spirit is, let the people decide. But when he resigned, that means he just doesn't want to run. He betrayed his people. So that's a different kind of spirit. Thank you.
Thanks. I would like to invite the last question from the gentleman at the back.
Sebenarnya serba sedikit berkenaan dengan yang sudah ditanya tadi tentang sistem jawatan kuasa pilihan. Kerana saya juga berfikir bahawa sistem jawatan kuasa pilihan, silap saya, Gordon Timmins in his book The Malaysian Politics the Second Generation, dia menulis yang silap komiti itu tidak pernah do its function seperti yang in other Commonwealth countries. Yang saya ingin bertanya itu, apakah kekangan yang utama kepada empowering the silap committee system di Malaysia supaya dia boleh take up its role seperti di UK ataupun di Singapura juga, kalau tersilap saya beberapa tahun lalu for their OFMA bill, mereka memanggil beberapa saksi datang to present information to Parliament. If I'm not mistaken, Dr. PJ Tam was one of those. Yang kedua, ini lebih singkat, minta maaf ya. Tapi saya ingin bertanya, anak-anak Profesor James Chin setelah di MA63 amendment, dia pernah berkata yang a new sort of federal state relationship must be forged, not just in the context of the Bornean states, tetapi juga sama the states in Malaya juga. Kalau MoU sekarang di current MoU expires, will we see a culture di mana the states and the federal government also have a similar MoU, and we see a difference in the relationship antara the federal and the state? Thank you.
Tadi sudah saya sebut berhubung dengan select committee. I have requested the speaker melihat semula peraturan supaya menggubalkan atau memindahkan pelbagai peraturan yang ada, masukkan satu provision lagi dalam peraturan supaya membolehkan pihak parlimen menubuhkan jawatan kuasa sama macam jawatan kuasa yang ada di United Kingdom, di Australia, di mana-mana negara Commonwealth yang lain, yang mempunyai full authority memanggil saksi, memanggil consultant, bahkan memanggil expert to advise them on the legal point or expertise point. Banyak lagi point yang perlu itu. Kalau soalan chemical poison, macam orang nak buat undang-undang poison, nak meminda undang-undang untuk industri, contohnya cannabis, industri ketum contohnya. We need some other expert other than legal expert in the field to advise the jawatankuasa. And ada duit diberi, provide for under parliament. So jadi ini, it is in our view lah, dalam kita punya radar lah, untuk melihat pindaan ini akan dilaksanakan. Bukan menggunakan the Special Select Committee ditubuh di bawah peraturan 81/1 yang ada sekarang ini, yang tidak punya kuasa untuk memanggil sesiapa. Sebabnya dulu kita guna Special Select Committee itu, Select Committee itu pergi ke sana sini seluruh negara. Like myself, I went on to Australia and New Zealand with that Select Committee to see how Australia and New Zealand do their work in terms of criminal exchange of documents. Sebelum itu we didn't have exchange of document dalam mahkamah. Jadi sekarang kita dah ada the sistem itu. Jadi itu satu. Yang kedua tadi berhubung dengan apa nama ni,
Federal state
on the legal point or expertise point. Banyak lagi point yang perlu itu. Kalau soalan chemical poison, macam orang nak buat undang-undang poison, nak meminda undang-undang untuk industri, contohnya cannabis, industri ketum contohnya. We need some other expert other than legal expert in the field to advise the jawatankuasa. And ada duit diberi, provide for under parliament. So jadi ini, it is in our view lah, dalam kita punya radar lah, untuk melihat pindaan ini akan dilaksanakan. Bukan menggunakan the special select committee ditubuh di bawah peraturan 81/1 yang ada sekarang ini, yang tidak punya kuasa untuk memanggil sesiapa. Sebabnya dulu kita guna special select committee itu, select committee itu pergi ke sana sini seluruh negara. Like myself, I went on to Australia and New Zealand with that select committee to see how Australia and New Zealand do their work in terms of criminal exchange of documents. Sebelum itu kita we didn't have exchange of document dalam mahkamah. Jadi sekarang kita dah ada the sistem itu. Jadi itu satu. Yang kedua tadi berhubung dengan apa nama ni,
Federal state relations.
Federal state relation ni, kita hanya melihat the federal state relation ni menerusi the prism of apa nama ni, MA63 dan IGC report. Jadi state government akan kajikan IGC report dan Act of Malaysia, dia ada Act of Malaysia 2, satu yang diluluskan di England, Chapter 35 and Chapter 26 diluluskan di Tanah Melayu, Dewan Rakyat, Dewan Negara, pada bulan Ogos 1963. Jadi berlandaskan ini saja, Act of Malaysia, Agreement Malaysia dan IGC report. Dia tengok sidang itu. Jadi dia tidak perlu MoU lagi. Contohnya kalau nak mengkaji dalam perlembagaan kita ada macam artikel 11D, 112D. Semalam saya berbincang soalan artikel 112D. Tidak ada masalah, tidak ada formula how to provide di bawah artikel 112D. Hanya diberi pada tahun 69. Daripada 63 diberi 64 diberi 4 juta, lepas tu 65 diberi 8 juta, 69 diberi 16 juta. And then over the years it never been given anymore. Jadi what is the formula? The provision to help Sarawak and Sabah for development as well as administration. Tapi based on Sarawak and Sabah, there are 119% increase in terms of development and administration requirement for Sarawak and Sabah. But then the caveat is under the perlembagaan juga mengatakan bahawa based on the capacity and capability of the federal government to fund. Jadi ini banyak, dia tidak terdapat di MoU, kerana perlembagaan itu sendiri dah ada provision dia. Jadi kita nak cari pemula saja.
Terima kasih Datuk Seri. Thank you so much.
Very interesting question. In 1962, when negotiation was made by the leaders of Sarawak, Sabah and Peninsula, there are many things that they talk about. But if you go back to history again, Sarawak was completely divided on the question of whether or not to join Malaysia in 1962. The simple reason was Sarawak was still not yet independent, so was Sabah. They fear that they are not talking at the same level with people in the peninsula. But then what happened after that was Tunku Abdul Rahman cleverly invited the leaders of Sarawak and Sabah to come over to the peninsula in 1962 and 1963. The leaders in Sarawak and Sabah were so impressed with what they saw in Peninsular Malaysia in 1962 and 1963. Sarawak and Sabah was 30 over years, if not 40 years behind in terms of development, politics, social, infrastructure, physical and mental development. So, it was implied upon them that the same thing could be done to Sarawak and Sabah. Meaning, so that Sarawak and Sabah too will be as developed as West Malaysia. That what happened at that time, that persuaded particularly Sarawak leaders to agree on formation of the Malaysia. But then if you look back into history, since 1963 up to today, Sarawak is still way behind Peninsula for whatever reason, in terms of infrastructure and many other things. So this again make the present generation not so pleased. And then again, if you look at it, particularly on the question of wealth, Sarawak is so wealthy, and when Petronas Development Act was enacted, 1974, it really gives so much money to the center, but so little was given back to Sabah and Sarawak. And looking at the development that we have, they never fulfill actually the promise made by that time, or implied promise made during that time before they entered into the agreement. And yet, the wealth of Sarawak and Sabah was all taken to the center, whether it's true or not, for the development of particularly Kuala Lumpur. Then people in Sarawak say, look at Sepang Circuit, look at KLIA, look at Twin Tower, look at all the big things, include the Penang Bridge, they say, all built by Sarawak money and Sabah money. What happened to us? So that estranged the relationship between Sarawak, younger generation, and Peninsula. The government is different. You must remember that the government think about the whole thing. Talk about security, talk about health, but in terms of the government service, whether or not we can stand on our own. So this is two different issues here. One is to impress the new generation that Kuala Lumpur administration, not the West Malaysian, Kuala Lumpur administration, whether they are fair or not to Sarawak and Sabah. In spite of the fact that they have known over the years almost 50%, especially in the 80s and 90s, of the budget from Petronas Fund. So why not give to Sarawak and Sabah? Why Sarawak and Sabah have been marginalized? We still don't have connectivity, we don't have road, water, electricity, penetration into the interior. And road, for instance, we still use longboat in the river. It's very dangerous. So, unless this thing is addressed, then you can find the relationship will become much better, and maybe unification truly, the heart and mind of Sabah and Sarawak could be forged. That's not only that one. And also, if you look at in the service, how many Sarawakian and Sabahan become the KSU, Director General? Have Sarawak and Sabah ever become the Ketua Setiausaha Negara? Are we short supply of those kind of brain? When I became minister, NRE was unknown ministry. After 2 years, I raised up NRE become the top ministry. Ministry of Law. Nobody cares about it very much until I came into the Ministry of Law. And then during the last survey, not by the government, Ministry of Law was among the top 3 during the 2021. So there may be some more clever people, cleverer than me, in Sarawak and also in Sabah. Why cannot we become KSU, Director General, KSN, Minister of Finance, Minister of Health, Education? So unless we come up with that kind of not younger brother term for us, this feeling of the younger generation will continue to exist.
Before I go to Prof. Wu, I'd just like to ask Datuk Seri, do you think that the fact that Indonesia will have its new capital in Kalimantan Timur as Nusantara would have any impact on how East Malaysians look at the matter?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the coming of the administrative center for Indonesia to Kalimantan, I look at the opportunity for Sarawakian and also for Malaysian. But it has got to go through Sarawak, because certainly you don't go direct to the headquarters in Palangkaraya. You'll have to go through Sarawak. So if you go through Sarawak, you have to develop the infrastructure required. But then again, there is a plus point. You look at the business opportunity, economic opportunities arise from what happened there. Exactly, that's what I have been telling people. All these years, actually, see in the last 10 years, a lot of people from Kalimantan whose